All right, let me pull up the articles from yesterday. So is this the one you guys were talking about? The interview with Ian about design goals and shit? Is this the one? This is the latest one, right? Let's see. Oh, so it was Fanbyte that did it. Wait, how does Fanbyte get an interview with WoW, but Wowhead did not get their own interview? That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, so let's see. It was our sister site, Fanbyte, was part of a group interview with Ian, which answered many questions about Dragonflight. Topics include talent trees, design goals, the expansions, lessons learned from classic WoW and Shadowlands, player housing, Drakthir, and more. Let's see. Design goals and lessons learned. You mentioned previously how players have changed the way they play games. How has this directly affected Dragonflight and alt catch-up in Dragonflight? Oh, here we go. On the alts front in particular, it's really an extension and continuation of some of the philosophies that we've talked a lot in Shadowlands patch 9.15 last fall and carried forward into Eternity's End. The way we originally conceived so many of our WoW systems and investment choices as things that existed on the character level. What is your character's journey through the world? Increasingly, what we've heard from our players, particularly as they play more alts, no, it's me, the player behind the keyboard. It's my journey, and I've already done this thing once on my warrior, and making me do it again on my mage. Okay, it makes sense for my mage to have that journey, but I, the player, don't want to repeat because I enjoyed it the first time. I don't want it to do a second. Yeah, we've been saying this for like 6 years now. I don't get it. What's the problem? It's really taking a step back and re-examining a lot of what we do, and through that lens has led to allowing skips, opening up options, and turning things that are mandatory on your first character to things that you can choose whether or not you want to do them on your subsequent characters, and we want to carry all of that forward into building Dragonflight from the ground up. But things like access to content and cosmetics and utility, all that feels like it should be account-wide. Linear narrative arcs are best experienced the first time. If you want to replay them on other characters, great, but we don't want to force you to do that in order to access content or other key rewards or systems. Keyword, key rewards or systems. Does that mean like reputation? Are we finally going to get account-wide reputation, or what's going on here? Hey, yo. Then it remains a core character thing is gear progression, getting your items, leveling that up, mastering your role, mastering the gameplay of that class to earn better and more powerful rewards. All the rest we're shifting increasingly towards an account-wide space. Renowned account-wide. Other way, I think, in terms of how players play the game in general, there's no question that min-maxing and internet resources and seeking out to solve the right way to do things is what's increasingly expected at all levels of gameplay, even by players who self-identify as casual will go to Icy Veins, go to Wowhead to learn how they should be playing, and we always need to bear in mind that when we design any of our systems, I think when we create the talent system, having seen how a whole new generation of players played throughout 2004 Classic talents or 2007 Burning Crusade talents, we understand that this isn't really about asking you with the expectation that you're going to figure out how to play your class and come up with your own unique play style. Some people will enjoy that, but they're frankly a minority. A lot of people are going to go and read goodies and see what the pros are doing and see what experts in PvP or Mythic Plus are doing and be inspired by them. I agree. I think that shift happened a long time ago too. The shift in the gameplay where players kind of don't really need to figure out how to play their class themselves. They could just go out and find out now with the internet and everything how to do it, you know? What we want to still make sure there's room for is customization and, most importantly, flexibility in switching between different gameplay modes. I think the past World of Warcraft very often relied on friction to lock people into choices, or maybe not firmly lock but discourage people from switching because there was a cost you would pay. Looking back at the old school talent system from Classic, the escalating respec cost was one of the things that inspired our approach to things like respecing your Azerite armor or switching covenants or whatever else in recent expansions. But what we saw was that when players played Classic in 2019, they just farmed up the gold and respec constantly and felt like they still needed to be optimal in whatever they were doing. They didn't pick a hybrid build that was sort of okay at PvP and at raiding. They switched between the builds that were the best for each, and what was meant to dissuade activity just became this really annoying hurdle that you had to spend extra, often unenjoyable time to clear. And so recognizing that that's how players are going to approach those hurdles, they're not going to turn away from them. They're going to do whatever it takes to go over them, even if it makes the game less fun. Well, maybe we should build fewer of them. For our Dragonflight talent system, we'll have multiple loadouts that you can customize and lock in town. You can have your Mythic Plus build, your PvP build, your Raid DPS build, and just swap them on the fly when you're out in the field. Obviously not while in the middle of combat, but otherwise without restriction, without an escalating cost. Play the game you want to play the way you want to play it. Sounds good. Sounds good. I like it. What if they do not do account-wide rep, but unlock the rewards account-wide? Kind of like the same thing, but for those who want to earn the rep on each ult, it still works. Yeah, like, rewards should be account-wide. Zareth Mortis is a perfect example, right? Like, Towelliee just got exalted with the Enlightened. I should be able to log into my Brewmaster, still get rep if I want to, but go to the vendor and be able to get the 40,000 gold augment rune token, or get the 239 item level thing or whatever. Like, that's the way it should work. Now if you want to get that rep for whatever other reason, you can. And in Dragonflight, if they start adding, let's say, reputation or gear back to the rep, then so be it, even better. The thing with Blizzard is right now, they're very just inconsistent with the account-wide stuff, right? There are some things in some past reputations that were account-wide. But, I mean, having, like, only 1/3 of the rewards account-wide, and not all of them, there's just no reason to do that. Right? Like, for instance, it's about once again, accessibility is my key word that I like to use. Let's say in Dragonflight, you level and you do all of the dragon reputations, and each dragon rep has gear. Let's say they have, like, I don't know, ring, gloves, cloak. Let's just say that's a thing. Well, when my first character, Towelliee, hits max level 70, and I've unlocked Dragonflight, my next ult, who would be my Brewmaster, he should be able to go to those vendors and just get that gear. Why? Because that gear will now make me a bit more powerful on my ult, and will make my ult experience faster and not make me take as long as my main did to level. Right? That's very simplistic. That should be something that should just be by default in the game. And from what Ian is saying, it seems like they're going that way. I mean, he recognizes that everyone's main character is what they want to do their work on, and the ult is what we want to have a better time on. Let's go. All right, so what ended up being known as borrowed power tended to be additional endgame leveling mechanics. If you're moving away from that, what do you have planned for endgame for this time around? At its core, gear, customizing the gear, upgrading that gear. I think the way the game plays out right now in Shadowlands and Eternity's End and Zareth Mortis, we didn't really add new renown levels or traits to unlock on your soul binds, but the progression feels pretty good, pretty robust. Players have goals to work toward. I think in terms of novelty, there's going to be a whole lot of play with just from the talent system and the fundamental changes that brings. As we move on, I think we have hooks in place in our talent system to potentially explore other avenues once we're really kind of happy with the foundation that we've built. Such as, for example, we could conceivably have some additional talent points that could be earned post-max level within the expansion. That's not something we're going to do right at launch, but in later patches. It certainly is an option that's on the table for additional progression and customization that isn't borrowed power, but it's just yours and your character's powers. So are they talking about like how in vanilla we had like books for higher level talents and shit like that? Kind of like an increase in power, but through your talents. I mean, he did say brand new talents. All right. Or alternate abilities for itemization to hook into the talent system, like kind of like what we saw the Relic do for the artifact system in Legion, or like how old school Diablo 2 items might give you +1 rank at a specific talent. Our system is being built with those hooks in place so that we don't want to overcomplicate things at the start, but we also want to make sure there's a lot of room for growth and depth in what we're building. Dude, I'm telling you, that talent tree is going to look massive eventually. That thing's going to take up like the majority of your screen. You won't be able to see what you're doing. How much of the success of WoW Classic has influenced Dragonflight? I alluded to this a little earlier, but some of it is the evolution of the talent system and kind of realizing a direct comparison of the direct strengths and weaknesses of how modern players have played through the 15-year-old system versus what our current Shadowlands era system was doing and helping guide us toward what hopefully is the best of both worlds that offers the depth and customization of the original system and the flexibility that players have come to embrace in the Shadowlands system. Again, as I was mentioning earlier, players play games differently. Players play World of Warcraft differently, and the exact same data and the exact same designs led to one type of behavior 16 years ago, led to different behaviors today. Back to 2005, touched on this earlier, it was exceeding uncommon for you to respec a lot. People would sometimes, I remember myself, I would wait for the patch because Blizzard would clear my talents for free because gold was so scarce. People didn't know how to make it as well. The idea of spending 25 gold just to move a couple of talent points around seemed insane, and so you used hybrid builds. You used a build that had talents that did nothing for your current activity because you also wanted to jump into Warsong Gulch with that same build. It's not how people play the game anymore. Same systems, same talents, the level of knowledge has risen, community expectations have changed, and people now know how to make the gold, and they go do it. They also respec regularly, and they flask up and use all the consumables that are available that in the past were just high-end luxury things that few people even imagined that you would use on a regular basis. Very true. I rarely remember using any flasks, minimal potions in vanilla. Where was I? That's one of those ways where we have literal proof that same game, different outcome. In the sense, a lot of the time we would wonder pre-classic how much of players changed and how much of it is we change this aspect of a game, and should we turn back the clock? Should we bring back these old systems, and would they play out the way they did back then? This helped answer some of those questions. I think hopefully where that leads us is trying to pull in the best of all of these elements and trying to create systems through our profession, rework and recreate or try to recreate some of the notoriety and reputation that you might have as a crafter on your server. As being the person on your server who had the Arcanine Reaper plans, or the enchanter who had mastered all the enchants and had the best enchanting rod and everything else that people would seek out because they knew that they were the best. Well, our communities are larger, things are more varied and complex in terms of gearing paths, but is there a way that we can chase that reputation, that social interaction in our professions today? That's the sort of thing that Classic helped us inspire. Pretty good answer. You're going to need 3 27-inch monitors to see the entire talent tree. It feels that way, man. I mean, you see how big it is, right? Just on the UI window. I mean, right now you log into WoW, your talent tree is just, like on the left, little box. This one seems like it's going to be like... The progression of some story elements was locked behind Renown, and Shadowlands has this idea been abandoned. I wouldn't say we've abandoned it completely. There's different approaches to different types of storytelling. Sometimes it's reputation, sometimes it's the passage of time, sometimes it's nothing at all, and it's just how quickly you can play through the story. I think with most narratives we try to create, there is value to pacing, particularly since it's a shared experience. In other media, there's the Netflix-style bingeable series where it comes out and you can sit down and watch all 8 episodes and be done with it versus the weekly episodic one. If it's the bingeable version and you haven't finished yet or haven't had a chance to yet, like you're not all the way through Squid Game, you just avoid the internet, you avoid spoilers, you avoid discussions there. In World of Warcraft, that's not really possible. There's a community that experiences stories together. When major events happen, like the attack on Ardenweald, and Sylvanas' fight with Tyrande there, or us rescuing Anduin from the clutches of the jailer and learning things about the nature of how to thwart the jailer and so on and so forth, you can't hide from that. You're experiencing it together. We want to be careful to not have a story that if you didn't blast through it all on the first day, it feels like you missed it all and have nothing to look forward to anymore. And you're hiding from spoilers as you're playing the game and trying to talk to other people about WoW. That's very true. It's really hard especially if you're always on Reddit or on Twitter or all those things, to not see just a single reaction, right? Even as content creators, we can't even react on Twitter to most of the shit that happens in WoW because then we're gonna get like shit on for spoiling, it's very hard to not want to talk about something that's happened in the moment that it happened. Who's on Reddit? Naysayers. Final Fantasy 14 feels that pain hard. Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, no, well, you Final Fantasy 14 community, you could tell how they do it, right? You could see it in the viewer numbers. on a release of an expansion for Final Fantasy, how terrible they are compared to like an expansion in WoW release, right? An expansion release in Final Fantasy, unless you're the biggest of big streamers, ain't nobody really watching you. You saw how streamers actually adjusted that strategy, right? A lot of streamers didn't do the MSQ until weeks later because then they knew they would get people to watch them because those people had already done the story themselves. Final Fantasy is a perfect example of that. Like, they're good at not getting spoiled because they just don't watch. It's part of their shit. Happy loses a shit ton of viewers on launch week. Absolutely. At the same time, we don't also want you to always feel like there's stuff I want to do, but I guess I have to wait until Blizzard lets me do it or lets me access the next chapter of this thing. I think we're leaning away from time gating as an overall structure. But I think it still has its place, of course. So maybe just less time gating in Dragonflight, not full time gating. That's good. You want to strike a balance where you can dig into the depth and politics of these Centaur clans at your own pace and see where that leads, and there's deep stories there for you to uncover as you see fit. But when it comes to a major campaign narrative, villains, heroes, and so forth, that's going to have a certain weekly cadence to it. Sometimes that'll also complement the raid not being open yet, or this portion of the raid hasn't become necessarily accessible yet. So that itself has a time requirement as well. Oh, that's interesting. He said that. Portions of the raid haven't become accessible yet. I wonder if they're going to continue that thing that they did with the jailer. Maybe like in the first raid of Dragonflight, only the first 6 bosses are available. The last 2 won't be until like the following week or something. But again, that really wouldn't go with their thought process of only having a 10 to 11 day race to world first. I don't know. Yeah, like Wings and ICC. Sure. First 4 bosses open, then the rest of bosses open up. Exactly. Let's see. Strong socialization requires a bit of friction, and that's clear when in Classic. How do you take those learnings and bring them to modern WoW without losing the player that only has an hour a night? I think to some extent it ties back into the question about whether or not we do match-made Mythic Plus and why we don't. I think what we try to do is try to offer options and offer incentives and reasons. If you want to do the hardest raid content out there, you need a 20-person raid group. That does require some commitment, and there are some hurdles in organizing one of those requires recruiting and keeping a balanced roster versus normal or heroic. It doesn't matter if you have 12 or 27, you could just jump in and get it done. The reward for that is prestige. It's getting cool achievements and mounts and some of the best loot around. But it's not the only way to play, and it's not the only way to access the content. I think we've tried to make sure that we're not excluding people saying you can't PvP or you can't do dungeons unless you sit in town and find a group or you have a social network. There are reasons why, if you're open to it, it should be good and it should be rewarding, and hopefully we can encourage people and make it safer. A separate piece of this discussion is ongoing efforts to fight toxicity in game that generally make players more likely to have a positive experience interacting with others as we encourage them to explore part of the magic of MMOs. At the end of the day, if you want to play World of Warcraft on your own and explore this vast world, it's a game that's always supported that from 2004 onwards. But there's so much out there, so much unique enjoyment to be had by cooperating with or cooperating against in this shared multiplayer world. That's something we're always trying to encourage. Yeah, that doesn't seem like what you're doing with Wrath Classic, though, but that's just me. Legendary Ian dodging. I mean, I think he's fine. I think it's fine. He's saying it plain and simple. You know, you yourself, and I've always said it too over the years, it's not the game that makes you not social. You make yourself not social. You are the person in control of your character in World of Warcraft, right? Like, you decide how much effort you put into how you want to play the game and how social you want to be, whether you want to be in a guild or you want to be a lone wolf, whether you want to take the time to try to find a static Mythic Plus group, or whether you just want to queue up whenever you have a shot during the week. Like, if you can't sit there and say that World of Warcraft is not one of the most accessible MMORPGs in the world, you're crazy. Every type of player can play WoW. There's nothing restricting you from playing the basics of the game. Everyone can raid. Everyone can do dungeons. Everyone can PvP. There's no time gating there. Don't give me responsibility. How much will players be able to fill out their talent tree? Will it eventually be full like artifacts? There's definitely a level of choice, probably in a similar ratio to how talent trees played out in Classic, though we have a different system with both spec and class trees and 2 types of points. So you can make choices about how you want to perform your role more effectively, and then separate choices about utility and hybrid options, because we know that if we ask you to choose between more DPS or a better Blink or Frost Nova or something, you're always going to pick more DPS. True. With artifacts in Legion, we made it so eventually you could fill out the entire tree, in part because there wasn't a smooth respec system, and the intent was to make sure that you didn't have this analysis paralysis where you could make wrong decisions, because in the long run, it was all going to even out. Whereas with talents, a big portion of what the system is about is differentiation. It's setting yourself apart from other players of the same class and spec, and being able to tailor yourself to your preferred playstyle, preferred activities. And the system we're imagining is one where you're likely at end game have different loadouts. The one build you use to run dungeons, and one build you use to run PvP or raids, and you set them up in towns and swap between them freely on the fly as it suits your activities, which I love. So is the goal of the new talent system to bring back abilities that have been removed in the past? It's an option. We've done a fair bit of that in recent years, separate from the talent trees, hearing feedback on these that were pruned in Warlords or Legion of things that were missed, whether it's altered time for mages or whatever else, and finding ways to bring those back. The talent system is more about creating a stronger, more interesting, deeper foundation on which to build our class and spec gameplay, and less about overhauling the existing gameplay of a given spec. In Legion, we set out to rebuild a lot of our specs from the ground up. Here, I think we're pretty happy with how most specs play, and what we're hearing from our players is that they're pretty happy with how most specs play. We're not asking people to relearn what a Beast Mastery Hunter means or an Outlaw Rogue means. If you like your rotation and you like your moment-to-moment gameplay, we want to make sure that you can largely recreate that via a series of choices within the new system. But you'll have other options, other customizations, other hybrid options available to you that previously were closed off by the row-style talents in the past. Bless you! When do you get a talent point for a specific tree? Let's see. There's 2 types of talent points. There's class points and specs. The tree on the left is your class tree, which you will see no matter what your spec is. All druids have the same druid tree. All mages have the same mage tree. Then your fire tree, you'll only see if you're a fire mage, and your resto tree, you'll only see if you're a resto druid. As you level up, there's a schedule that we have laid out on our end of which type of point you are going to get at which level. I'm going to make up numbers here, but at level 37, you might get a druid points. At level 38, you get a resto point. At 39 and 40, druid points, and 41 and 42, resto points. The key here is to, over the course of your leveling points, you get a certain amount of each, but you're choosing to spend them across separate ecosystems. I think that was one of our big learnings from seeing how the classic talent trees played out, and the question we kept running into is there are right answers here and there are mathy answers, and players are always going to take the throughput options, the options that increase their damage per second, healing per second, survivability as a tank over that little bit of utility, that extra distance on a blink, or the reduced cooldown on interrupt on something. We put them as a head-to-head choices. Let's not. I like that. So let's not. Even in a hybrid sense, it's a cool fantasy that we want to chase and recapture of the idea that you're a ret paladin, but are you ret holy versus ret prot? Well, if you could be just ret and just really good at damage things, you're going to do that. I think we're creating more interesting and nuanced decision spaces by separating out the type of trees. Ret prot confirmed. Imagine a prot paladin, but with like prot talents and divine storm or something like that. Although that probably wouldn't be the case, but it would be kind of, or ashes. Imagine a prot paladin with ashes. Like, can you imagine like the last row of prot? You get to choose between divine toll, ashes, or tier, right? The main ability for prot during Legion. Oh, I don't mean Ashen Hollow. I mean Wake of Ashes. The ability that gives you like straight up 5 holy power. What is it called? It's called Wake, right? I guess they call it Wake. Wake of Ashes. That's the one. Has the team started thinking about ways to repurpose Covenant abilities? Eagle-eyed observers may have noticed that the Convoke the Spirits icon in our sample tree, talent tree that we showed off, that is accurate. That is going to live there. Whether it's Covenant abilities or even some Shadowland legendaries are something that we're looking to roll into the talent system. What are the greater hits there? What are the things that feel like they just are cool parts of the class going forward? And what are the things people are happy to leave behind? That's something that once it's all out there on alpha, we'll be listening, and I'm sure that we're going to iterate on further as we go from there. Just Divine Toll. I'm good with Divine Toll. Leveling. How will Dragonflight handle Chromie time? Our current plan is to rescale all the existing expansions, including Shadowlands, from 10 to 60, so that it comes out of Exile's reach, or play the starting experience of your choice, and then pick any of the single expansions that you want to play through, and that will get you through Dragonflight. Are there any plans for when there are inevitably too many levels once again? It's something we're discussing. We know that in the year 2030 or something, we'll be back to be, well, 3 digits. And what does that mean, and how we avoid having the same problem? I don't think 70 is too big a number, and I think that changes. I think the changes we're making to Chromie time and Dragonflight to make sure that at the end of the day, you can pick up the character. You could be a brand new character to World of Warcraft and play through a single expansion, get caught up to speed, and jump into the new thing. That's already a vast improvements over the disjointed world that we lived in the past, where the increasing level cap meant you were just jumping between more and more disparate settings in the roughly the same amount of time. I think eventually I'd love to find a perfect solution here. We definitely tossed around the idea of what it would look like if we stopped adding levels, or if we did level-less expansions. The levels do a lot, but levels do a lot for us and for every RPG. There's a reason that they're a tried and true method, and it's a straightforward increase in power. New stuff to look forward to. Now new talent points. And so saying we're just going to stop doing that would raise a lot of questions that we would need to find satisfying answers to. But we keep talking about it. But in the meantime, we also want to focus on making sure that the experience you get tomorrow is as good as it can be, and not necessarily hamstring that for the sake of solving the 6 years from now problem. 6 years from now doesn't matter if this year isn't fun. True. 8 more years of World of Warcraft, I could take it. Well, I mean, you think about it, 8 more years. Right now we're level 70 to 80, 80 to 90, 90 to 100. That sounds about right. Almost 2.5 years per expansion. So yeah, I mean, he did say 12 13.0 during one of his interviews. So I'm just saying, man, you know, being 120 was fine with me. Yeah, when we were Twilight devastating for like 40 million damage. Are there any new PvP features in Dragonflight? This presentation today was not a complete exhaustive list of everything that is new or changing in Dragonflight, just kind of the biggest beats. On the PvP front, a couple of things that we're working on. First off, probably not a huge surprise to a lot of folks who follow our discussions on this, the solo shuffle brawl that we introduced recently in Eternity's End. Setting it up as a brawl was always meant as a little bit of a test run to try it out, get feedback on it, help refine the queue system, and so forth, but it's something that we want to convert into a rated mode in Dragonflight. So if you want to solo queue and have a competitive PvP experience where you're match made based on rating, and you can earn progress, earn gear, and participate and compete, that's something we want to offer there. We've also been taking a close look at how PvP gearing in general works, and think that there's things we're happy about with the way that the Conquest is played out and the return of PvP vendors there, complemented by the Vault. But we've also heard a lot of feedback about how gearing and item level tiers play out later in the season, especially, and while upgrading your gear with Conquest, that feels like a good fit for taking that gear into raids and dungeons, and kind of suits the PvE side of the game. That much granularity actually can feel counterproductive in PvP. We're thinking of getting back to a system where all Conquest gear just scales up to that PvP item level ceiling regardless of your rating. Once it's Conquest gear, that's the best for PvP, period, and then upgrading it and progressing through the ranks from Duelist, Gladiator, and so forth is raising the PvE item level to let you bring it into other high-end content. That's what you want to do, a la Draenor system, yeah? We think that'll make for a better, more skilled-oriented competitive experience on the PvP side of things. PvP is Resident Sleeper. Solo queue, arena, or rated battlegrounds. I mean, the thing is, will solo queuing for rated will rated solo queue give you arena rating and the same rewards as everybody else, though, right? Like, can you be a rank 1 solo queue? I think So the Drakthir Evoker, it was mentioned that the Drakthir's bronze magic could have a hastening effect. What does this mean? It's little bits of time manipulation, whether that's light versions of a bloodlust or power infusion type effect, or even on the healer side, effectively rewinding or turning back time to undo recently sustained injuries. I think that's a type of healing magic we haven't had a chance to explore yet, and where some unique mechanics for preservation evokers could arise. There's mostly green bronze hybrid on that side, and if you the green side of it, it's more traditional dream restorative magic, not too different from what we've seen druids do. But there's a lot of really exciting opportunities on the bronze Dragonflight side of just to realize new mechanics. That's actually pretty cool. Like, imagine you're like a preservation evoker. Oh yeah, hang on. I thought I just saw Lula. Imagine like you're healing a tank and you have like a time rewinding ability that all it does is it just reverts the hit that you took from the boss. So let's say the boss hits you with like a hard mechanic that hits you for like 80% of your health. Well, you put, you on the bronze side of things, you could put like that buff on your tank before that hit, and then when you take the 80% hit, it reverts it and you just go right straight back to full health, like a lay on hands kind of thing. Wax on, wax off. Healing with time sounds different. Yeah, it would be just like a power heal on almost like on a 2-minute cooldown or something, like altered time. Imagine a raid save like that. Yeah, altered time for healers, exactly. Minority Report the healer. Oh my god. Many players have commented that there has been a stale healer meta for multiple raid tiers until this tier with the addition of Evoker. What steps are you planning to take to ensure that all healers are unique and are valued in groups and in high-end content? Oh boy, this is going to be a good one. As always, the answer there is differentiation. It's thinking about damage profiles, thinking about some of the utility that they have, whether it's cooldowns or extra stuff like Druid Stampeding Roar or Life Grip or other tools that they bring to the table that can encourage a varied roster. Now, as we increase the number of healer specs, not everyone can be represented even in larger raid sizes. We don't expect you to have 6 or 7 healers, but you should always be happy and grateful and think about, okay, cool. It's a good thing that we have this because this brings us a useful tool that helps us on these type of encounters. We're going to see at the very, very high end, the MDI in dungeons, the world first level in raids. People have multiple geared ults. We won't always see that diversity because they're trying to solve for a narrow problem posed by a single encounter, where maybe we want 3 paladins and 2 disc priests, whatever, because that's what the encounter demands. But across the board, across an entire raid tier, across a range of situations imposed by dungeons, we want to make sure that the healers feel viable and feel valued. And that's an ongoing exercise for our combat team. Our goal first and foremost is to make them fun and flavorful and give them unique tools. And the next and final steps as we go through the later stages of beta will be tuning, really figuring out exactly whether they need an extra tool or whether they have one tool too many to make sure they're not overshadowing other healers and seeing how they fit into the meta. We want to start off with, well, we want to make the thing fun and cool and then move on to solving the balance problem. I think if we're overdoing the latter from the start, that can hinder our ability to really just make something that is exciting from the first minute you play. Yeah, I mean, makes sense, right? We always say every tank is viable, every healer is viable, every DPS spec is viable. Get over it. You're not Echo, you're not Liquid. Play however you want. If you want to play at a high level, then get into a Mythic raiding guild and then experience the meta yourself. It's that simple. Done. 15 Evokers, first raid, world first. I doubt it. Will the Drakthir be able to use black magic? The Black Dragonfly is certainly part of the dragon kind, and while they have some nefarious history with Deathwing and his descendants, Rathian is a good ally of ours. And there are subtle differences between the Black Dragonflight Fire and the Red Dragonflight Fire, but I think Drakthir Evokers are uniquely gifted in being able to harness and channel the power of all the aspects and of all the flights, so all of them will have a place in some form. Oh, really? Because I don't see a tank spec for Earth Warding stuff, just saying. Will Empower spells make it to other classes? Maybe eventually anything is possible, at least for Dragonflight. That is a Drakthir Evoker specific mechanic. It's not something that all of their spells will do. But the key signature abilities that they have, I think the most natural one being, imagine a literal dragon's breath, where the more you inhale, the more you build up, the more powerful the energy you release is going to be. A simple way of thinking of that is imagine a skill which has a variable cast time of 1, 2, or 3 seconds. You choose whether or not you want the 1 second version or the 3 second version. The 3-second version might have a longer range and leave a lingering dot on everyone that you just incinerated. The 1-second version might be something that you can pop off quickly and get back to moving around, which will have their use and upsides and downsides, and it's something that you are in a very organic way that a good pairing of mechanics and fantasy can decide on the fly. Yeah, that's that QTE shit where, like, you know, you hold down 1, and then once you're max power, unleash, you know, whatever. They did say that that's toggled, so you don't have to, you know, play it that way if you don't want to. I mean, that's definitely something new for WoW. Will the Drakthir be able to become other classes in the future? It's definitely possible down the line. I think it's exceedingly unlikely that any race other than Drakthir could ever been an Evoker, because you need wings, you need the ability to literally breathe draconic energy to perform any of the abilities. The Drakthir that we're meeting are all Evokers because that's what they were created by an Eltharion to be. That is their unique gift. They can channel the power of all the Dragonflights, and this is who they are. Now, as they emerge in Azeroth and integrate with the Alliance and Horde over time, they could learn to pick up an axe and be a great warrior, quite possibly, but that's not where their story is starting in Dragonflight. So, maybe 11.0. Let's see. Professions. Are the profession changes robust enough to be a complete alternative to the normal PvP, PvE content? That's a little harsh. They tend to be quite robust. They're focused on the Dragon Isles version of these professions, and there's a tremendous amount of additional depth, customization, specialization, progression to them. Individual professions will have their own specialization or talent trees, even more so than back in the day where if you were a blacksmith, you could be an armorsmith or weaponsmith. But here you could be an armorsmith who further specializes into making helms and further specs into bonuses to types of them or advantages in crafting them in a way that sets you apart from your fellow crafters. Whether it's being able to provide something that is particularly interest to your guild and your friends, or on the marketplace, a competitive niche where you can corner, like you're the helm crafter that everyone comes to on your server because everyone knows that you make the good stuff. There's someone else who specializes in gloves or something. I wonder how that's going to play out, man. At the end of the day, doesn't that all, I mean, to me, that boils down to recipes, right? Like, bear with me here. Like, what made crafting way back in the day really great was that a lot of the recipes were rare drops. They only dropped from like specific content, sometimes hard content. And sometimes you had to rerun that hard content over and over again till you got your recipe. And then you were like the only person on the server with that Lionheart helm recipe or, you know, weapon recipe, right? Are they going to do that again, though? Because if not, if all the recipes are easily accessible by everybody, then I don't think it's going to be a situation where you're the only person on your server who specializes in gloves. On a server like Illidan or Storm Rage, you're going to have hundreds of people that'll specialize in the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So in order for this layout that they're talking about to come to fruition, I think you have to have like 1% drop rates on some really insane recipes, or you have to have some sort of hard time getting mats so that you can actually fulfill work orders for people that need something, right? So I don't know. I mean, we're going to have to see how this plays out. But for me, it feels like they're going too hard into paint on making it feel like this profession system is going to be really unique to a point where only 2 or 3 people on the server can make a specific helm. I think it boils down to mats and recipes and how you get them and how rare they are. For a lot of people who already play the economy and hang out and deal with the auction house as almost like a full-time gameplay style, we want that level of depth and more for professions. So our hope is that we will see folks who are spending a lot of time hanging out in the crafting areas, applying their trade and picking up work orders, making gold and skilling up on the side as they do that. I don't know if it would fully support, supplant wanting or needing to venture out into the world. You need to gather your reagents from somewhere. While a lot of the cool stuff will be craftable, many of these things may also use materials which come from out of the world and from dungeons and elsewhere. But that's really exciting that we can do now with the new cooperative crafting and work order system is the ability to have bind-on pickup reagents that you can bring to a crafter and have them used to make something for you. So you might clear a dungeon or a raid or something in the outdoor world, or kill a rare mob and get a frame or get something that could be forged into a helm or sword. You may not have the skill to do it yourself, but you can take that bind-on pickup thing that required participating in some content, overcoming some challenge, or accomplishing something, take that thing to a crafter, give them a nice tip, maybe provide the materials, or they provide the materials and have them make you something cool. So it's a whole layer of engagement and interactivity on the social level of professions that is something that we've always really wanted to capture. It's pretty pog. Pretty pog. Free deviant fish with purchase. I mean, I can't wait to see how players fulfill work orders and put up work orders. Like, just the competition, you know? You know, for every work order completed, I'll give you 5 augment runes for your next raid. You know? I don't know, something dumb like that. How are gathering professions impacted by all the changes, including the new quality system? We want to add depth to gathering as well, though not quite as much there. There isn't necessarily the same multi-tier specialization of you're really good at picking this particular herb. I think there's a bit less fantasy there. And also, we want part of the choice that you make when picking your professions could also be, to some extent, how much depth you want, how deep you want to go. The stats that were mentioned in the deep dive presentation earlier today are going to apply not just to crafting, but also to gathering. If you're wearing a special set of gloves, if you've skilled up more, you may be able to gather more of an herb, more of an ore, or do so at a higher level of quality that will help provide inputs into potentially making better stuff. So there's extra depth there, extra interactions, but think not quite as much as you'll see for blacksmithing or tailoring. Player housing, huh? This is always the big one. Player housing is something that many players in the community have asked for. Has there been any consideration of this? That's something that certainly gets discussed around the team a fair bit. There's interest in that, and even when it was little things in the past like the farm in Pandaria, players have jumped at the chance to feel there's a portion of the world that they can call their own and customize in any way. It's something we still are excited about, still hope to deliver at some point, which is nice to hear him say that. So some point we'll get housing, I guess. I think every expansion we have the conversation internally on what are the set of features that make sense for this expansion and whether we want to really focus our art, resources, engineering, and everything else to it. Player housing is something that we would still love to realize one day, but it's not part of Dragonflight. It doesn't mean the dream is dead. It's something that still gets discussed a lot. So no housing in Dragonflight, period. Housing would make the cities empty. I mean, it depends on how you interact with your housing, right? I mean, other games with housing, did they also make the cities empty? I don't know. Like I said, the best way to do housing would be to make it really simplistic, but also link it to sometimes the progression of your character, right? It's like looking at your achievements in WoW, like your 25,000 achievements, and physically watching those achievements come to life in your home. Right? You could have like a little plaque that says feats of strength and it'll list all your feats of strength on it. Or you can have, you know, an item or a trophy that you could put like in a cool trophy room of all the mythic raid bosses you've ever killed in WoW. And you could choose which ones you want to display. Like, I'm really happy that I killed Deathwing, Sylvanas, and Jaina. So you have like all 3 of their trophies on display, you know? Going out there and farming items like they have in New World, where, you know, if you have this item, you know, hanging outside of your house, you get like a 5% damage boost in whatever expansion you're in the outdoor world. Nothing that would affect raiding or Mythic Plus or rated PvP, like world buffs that you can use just by making your housing system interact with your with the world. Right? So, I mean, those are a lot of cool things you can do. But at this point, it boils down to, you know, why would housing exist? Well, like I said, I want my achievements to come to life physically in front of me. Right? All the stuff I've done in WoW, I want to be a trophy fanatic, or I just want to build a cool home. I guess also the restriction depends on Blizzard's engine, right? Like, how much can you do with Blizzard's engine? Do they have like a Vox style way that you can build a home with your own wood and planks and put in doors and put in roofs, right? Like, does the engine support that? All that stuff comes into play. Because right now, if let's say the garrison is, let's say, the height of their tech for making housing possible, then you're not really going to be able to build your own house. You're just going to pick from like existing house shapes or house sizes, you know, and then you're just going to add into it. But yeah, I mean, according to him, Dragonflight is just not going to happen with player housing. Which old fan favorite systems do you see coming back? As an example, there's the Garrisons. When was Garrisons a fan favorite, by the way? Wait a minute. Do they mean like the Garrisons? Or I'm confused. I like the gold they made. Well, hell yeah, you like the gold they made. So did I. That's why I kept playing Draenor. Not for Dragonflight. The ones we laid out today are our major focus, but I think there's a piece of Garrisons that scratched a little bit of that itch that players have in mind when they think about player housing. There's a range of general spaces that we're eager to explore in the future, but we've learned over the years that it's better to do a few things well than do a lot of things in kind of an incomplete manner. We're really focusing on talents, UI, profession, and new class and dragon writing, alongside the beautiful world of the Dragon Isles itself, and trying to really make those the best they can be. But we're always going to be listening when it comes to pieces of the game that people would like us to revisit or should come to World of Warcraft in the future. Yeah, not Garrisons, please. Let's see. Dragon writing. Are the dragon mounts just used as a mode of transportation, or do they have gameplay attached to them? Your dragon companion is tied to the Dragon Isles. You can call upon them there. They are a native denizens of the Dragon Isles, and as you strengthen your bond with them, your ability and their ability to fly for longer and faster and farther will improve. Having this system that spans the Dragon Isles is both a way to get around, but also opens up a lot of exciting opportunities for content. I think we've only started to scratch the surface of that in our initial launch, but we want to do more down the line. Excuse me. Things like little race events. Yes. You remember how back in Burning Crusade and Netherwing Ledge, there was a series of races that you can go through as you were trying to earn a flying mount there. We can do the new 2022 version of that with this system and more. Accessibility. In addition to the UI updates, are there any other accessibility updates? Out of the box customizability and being able to move things around and adjust the scale of things by default without using add-ons, I think it's an improvement. We're always looking at the add-on community as a source for inspiration and trying to understand ways in which we can better serve our players with our default experience. We also have ongoing support and improvements to support of our controller APIs, which I know a lot of players who can't necessarily use a traditional mouse and keyboard setup are able to take advantage of in order to play the game with alternate devices. That's an ongoing process. I don't necessarily think that there's a specific piece of our Dragonflight revamp that's aimed at that, but it's something that we're continuing to incrementally consider and improve in all of our patches, in all of our updates to WoW's UI going forward. Mythic Plus, has there been any further thoughts on Mythic Plus queuing? Oh. No current plans to add matchmaking to Mythic Plus. I think we want to continue to improve our group finder to let players find others who have similar goals, motivations, gear, interests, and all the rest. The goal isn't for it to be painful, but there is something important to that social experience. Even the light social experience of someone putting themselves out there, saying they're looking for a DPS to run this key, reaching out and getting invited to the group. Particularly for content that is meant to be challenging, that's meant to have the potential for setbacks, the potential for failure. I think making sure that players can align their expectations and goals going into a group is really important part of having everyone have a satisfying experience. True. It's one of the reasons why we added options in the group finder recently in Shadowlands to let people specify whether they're looking to complete the key to get the great vault progress and some loot, or looking to time the key to push rating and level up more. We want everyone to be on the same page there. I think that's how we continue to approach it. And one of the big differences between Mythic 0 and Heroic Dungeons is pre-made group activity versus being able to push a button and getting a random one. The level of participation in Mythic Plus far exceeds any other pre-made group activity required content in the past. We've looked at player enthusiasm for the way that's been playing out and just try to see how we can make it better rather than fundamentally changing it. Yeah, dude, yeah, I agree. Mythic Plus queuing would be a shit show. That's a shit show. I mean, we're talking about thousands of depleted keys a week, even more than there is now. It would just be wrong. Yeah, I'm not sure who's asking for a Mythic Plus queue thing. I don't think I've seen that a lot. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just some inner community, Mythic Plus community thing. I don't know. Will people be able to solo Mythic raids in Dragonflight? Yeah, probably, not trivially, but yes, the way this generally works, and I know we've kind of confused it a bit with squishes and offsetting multipliers and counteract those squishes. It's ultimately the product of your power growth as a player through gear, through levels, through other things. Over the course of a given expansion from start to finish, as you get 10 levels and you get 150 plus item levels of gear, you probably get at least 4 times as powerful in terms of total stats, hits, points, DPS, and so forth. If you compare the numbers players are putting out in Sepulchre today to what they were doing in the 9.0 pre-patch level 50, you probably find that it's about quadruple. Yes, that's true. 2 expansions later, you're like 4 times 4, 16 to 20 times more powerful, and that means you can now go and solo stuff that required 20 players 2 expansions ago. Yeah, Blizzard. How about our Legion legacy damage? You know, when's that coming around? Is that coming around anytime fucking soon? Because we've been waiting, you know, I don't know, 2 expansions worth. That'd be great. You know, we can one-shot everything in Draenor, but when we go to Legion, you know, kill Jaden's still a pain in the fucking ass. Legion legacy damage confirmed for 10.0. One more expansion and now you're like 80 times more powerful, and that's part of where you can go in and destroy stuff, but that's the middle ground where it's like mechanics don't kind of matter. The raid wasn't trivial for 20 people back then. You might have the power of 20 people, but that doesn't mean you're going to walk in and one-shot mythic bosses or anything. And as the players reach that point, we definitely go back in and make adjustments to old encounters where there are mechanics that forcibly require multiple people that will frustrate you if you go there. And this is around the time when we start looking at 2 expansion to go to smooth out some of those rough edges. Yeah, that hasn't happened yet, though. That's the thing. Like, because there's still a lot of Legion stuff right now that people who aren't completely overpowered can overpower. Fucking Jaina and her Kardashian ass killing everyone. Community, what are some examples of the community council's influence on Dragonflight? I think most recent over the course of the attorneys MPTR and our last Shadowlands update, we changed a number of things like how flying was earned and unlocked, how the ability to make the second Universal Covenant Legendary was earned, what requirements were, and all that was the direct product of feedback from how we had it initially on the PTR, and players noting that it was going to cause frustration for their playstyles. They felt they were going to have to do content that they preferred not to do. They were going to feel like they were on a clock in terms of needing to get by a certain date, and so those changes were a direct result of that conversation, and I think we're really happy with how it's all played out. Last few weeks, the community council has been relatively quiet just because Shadowlands is out there, and we have talked through most of the changes in attorneys, and we all knew we have some big announcements coming up. We'll have a lot to talk about soon, but there wasn't much to discuss until we got past the announcement. Transmog, any changes to the transmog system? Ongoing expansion and customization of it is something we're looking to do, certainly by Dragonflight. Possibly before then is rolling a lot of white and gray quality items into the transmog system so that you can choose from a lot of simpler, humbler civilian attire. Yes! 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 Finally, man. Those gray and white items from the initial leveling process. Hopefully that shit's retroactive. I don't want to have to go back and level through Elwyn Forest just to get some grays or go to vendors to get some grays. Peasant Squad, let's go, bro. Yeah, man, it's awesome. We want to keep adding in more options for customization and self-expression. Statue Boy. What is the name of the Statue Boy? I don't know off the top of my head. He's affectionately called Rocky by some of our team, just as Zekhan was Zappy Boy for a while. I will dig into that and see if we can make it clear. Time passes. The name of the Stonewatcher in the cinematic is Koranos. Done. Great stuff. Good stuff. You know, sometimes when interviews happen, it's not just getting the answer to a yes or no question. It's kind of cool when someone like Ian elaborates on stuff, right? Elaboration, I think, is some of the best interview answers you can get, because it's the thought process, right? Like in 9.2, when the Skarzard developer and the other guys were talking to us in the blue post about the changes to like tier and to Zereth Mortis and the raid concepts and shit. You know, they elaborated a lot on why they did what they did. He is Stony Tony. I don't know, man. To me, he's Tony Soprano.